So I know most of you, and I've done this presentation a couple of times, frequently to audiences where I know almost no one. And so it'll be a slightly different flavor today. And the real objective is to get you thinking and talking about what it means to be a good mentor and a good mentee. And you might wonder why you need to worry about being a mentor, but every one of you has been in a position already in your career development that you've had to mentor someone, and you may not even have known it. You were watched by an undergrad student or followed by example. So it's something to think about. And also, the goal here is to talk about when you are the mentee and you have a mentor and you need something, and it's sort of get you thinking about how to empower yourself to make that relationship work, as opposed to the less effective default, which is to say, my mentor sucks and I can't get him to do get him to take care of me in the way I want. And so it's a dialogue to talk about that, and then we'll hopefully take no more than about, say, 25 minutes at around 12:30. Maybe like to start fielding questions directly. You can certainly interrupt. The idea is not to make this a didactic lecture. And I'd like you to think now, while we're talking about scenarios, about, you know, this has happened, or if this happened, or I know this happened with someone else, and what would have been the correct way to have handled it if it didn't turn out well, or what is the right thing I should do because it's happening now and I need to deal with this. And if I can teach you anything, it'll be that as the mentee, you can deal with it, and you can make things happen in a proactive way that doesn't involve stomping your feet and frankly pissing anybody off. So it's perhaps a lecture about human relationships. So I know most of you and the level of training you're at. I just want to confirm, you're a PhD student? You're with Dr. Duan, right? And what level are you at? You're also PhD, and I don't know the lady in the back.
I'm Robin, I'm with Dr. Kaiser, with MSc.
You're a?
Master's.
Master's, okay, great. So I've seen the face.
She's Roman.
She's Roman.
The next Roman goes on.
Oh, you're a clinical resident?
Yeah.
Ah, okay, good. So we have good flavor. The rest I know. So we've got a mixture of master's students almost finishing, PhD students almost finishing, PhD starting in the middle, postdoctoral fellows, PhDs tapping their feet waiting to get the thesis back from supervisor, master's students, technicians, new investigators about to become established investigators sitting in the back. So navigating the mentor-mentee relationship. So we'll touch on a few of these items. Why do we need mentorship? It's because the research world, and this is the context of developing you as a scientist working in the research world, things are changing up there, and there is real need today, more so than there was, say, 15 years ago, for structured mentorship. We'll talk a bit about the relationship and some of my own personal perspectives and what I can bring, and then we'll move on to group discussion. So a couple of things to keep in mind is that I don't consider myself a mentorship guru in an academic sense. What I'll tell you, there are many others more qualified about the science of mentorship than I. They can quote published literature if they so choose. That's not my approach. I've learned on the fly and put that into action. So there are many resources, books, articles in the web that you can go to if you're interested in the science of mentorship. And I have access to some of those, so you just come and see me if you like, and I can put you in touch. Recent colleague Mark Eisenberg, who's mentor with Donna Bucknell through the Institute of Circulatory Respiratory Health, commissioned scientists, who recently wrote a book and published it on the topic of mentorship. He'd probably give us an article or a copy for the group if we asked. And then, as I said, I'll just bring my personal perspective. I'm not so sure it's actually all that unique. It's unique because it's personal. but many people have similar perspectives, I'm sure, based on my experiences, my mistakes, lesson one, learn from your mistakes, my successes, and frankly, a heck of a lot of good luck along the way. So, this one for you guys is not that relevant, but that's me wearing my Batman costume, and I was probably kindergarten age, maybe just slightly before. My homemade jacket, homemade pants, that's what we used to wear, guys, and I was cool. So I have my bachelor's of biology and honors degree at the University of Winnipeg. I did master's of plant science. I really had no interest in animal physiology, and I liked plants. I was going to be a limnologist at one point in my life, which is to study freshwater lakes. Then became a lab technician, was officially a tech for 8 years, but that overlapped by at least 3, maybe 4 years with me starting my PhD with Dr. Stevens, physiology, and then eventually went to do my fellowship in a clinical section of pulmonary and critical care at the University of Chicago. And this, I'll talk about in a second, a very important transition, because I went from basic science to a clinical section with a super strong commitment to research. And that's where my eyes were opened to how a researcher who's not a physician can interface with clinicians and be an asset as well as exploit, it sounds negative, but exploit that situation to your own, to meet your own goals. So faculty starting in 2000, was actually recruited by the section of adult respirology and then got a cross appointment in physiology. I've since become fully appointed in the physiology department. That's some of my research training, what I do. I've been associated with several training programs over the years, graduate program committees, respiratory fellows in pediatric and adult respirology as well. My work with the Canadian Lung Association training program, as well as now the Canadian Respiratory Research Network, and with a couple of ICRA or CIHR funded training programs. So how did I get where I go? I think it's important to kind of appreciate that. And I think mentorship, diversity, and pedigree are the 3 words that come to mind when I think about how lucky I have been at serendipitous in developing my career. So mentorship at 3 levels. As a kid, hardworking parents, dollars didn't grow on trees. You wanted something, you dealt with it. You got it for yourself. Nobody handed it for free. That to this day is my credo. If there's a problem, I fix it. I fix my own problems, or I ask for help when I need it, but it's not someone else's responsibility. Very important to bring that into the mentor-mentee relationship. So this little kid grew up, and as you've seen the timeline already, did a PhD with Newman Stevens, and I like to show him because he's almost the antithesis in many ways, although very similar in many ways, to Dr. Solway, who some of you will remember from the Stevens Symposium this past summer. Stevens, curiosity-driven, Renaissance scientist type. You build what you need to make the science go. It's cool, it's interesting, I just want to know the answer approach to research. Solway, clinician, adult respirologist, critical care guy, business, science. He was very much curiosity-driven, technology-driven, as is Dr. Stevens, but Solway was a businessman. There was always a reason to do it, and was it efficient? And he said very frequently, keep your eye on the prize. And the prize for him was getting a grant, getting a paper, getting a job. Dr. Stevens was not quite so tangible in his mentorship style, which together actually empowered me. The other thing is clinical section. Huge difference between this basic science section and a clinical section. So I had the luck, the good fortune to be with these guys, and that led me to my faculty position. So diversity and the pedigree is the last point, and I say that only because I didn't appreciate until I got there how lucky I had been to have 2 internationally eminent supervisors, because they would come back on my CIHR grant applications, applicant, Halayko, trained by 2 of the world's best, blah, 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 at least for 5 years after I became an independent faculty member. And I didn't do that on purpose. It just was luck. So as you move forward and you think about...
Andrew, for a sec. So I think what this is really important for you in your career was the complementary training in both basic science and then doing something completely outside of what you were comfortable with. Right? You were in the lab doing basic science physiology, and then you went to a clinical department to do research. And I think for students to finish their PhD and then to go after a postdoc, I think the more contrast there is with your PhD, the better you're suited to go after your own independent career, because you're going to learn so many different skills that you would otherwise not get if you go and work with a colleague of your supervisor, which a lot of people do as well for a postdoc.
Yeah, I fully agree. I would say the only thing I think I could add at the point of PhD is I knew I liked lung biology. I didn't want to relieve the lungs.
No, that's fine.
But that's fine.
But
You're right. I went to Solways because I wanted to learn molecular biology, which we weren't doing in Stevens, and the clinical part came along. And one of the days I remember most clearly in him, in his lab, was the day he said, "Come with me." He was on service, and he had me stand in the corner of the bronch room, and I watched him do 2 bronchoscopies and take biopsies, endobronchial biopsies. And it was like, wow. Like, it's eye-opening when you're a scientist and you don't get that. So if you get the opportunity to do that, you should. I remember many years ago, Jack Bellick, who I think you know, Richard, took us when we were kids in Stevens' lab, took us to the NICU because he was looking at babies with persistent pulmonary hypertension, and you realize, the babies are this big, and it sort of really sort of hammers home the value of what you're doing, and it's really exciting in many ways. So yeah, the diversity is really important, and don't pigeonhole yourself.
yeah, don't feel too comfortable. Like, try to actively seek something that is going to be complementary
Yeah.
and outside of your comfort zone.
I would say one thing that part I haven't got on my slides that has always driven me is the desire to learn something new, to use a new technique to answer a question I couldn't answer 3 years ago or last week. And I do recall this being advice from both Julian and from New and Stevens that, the technology makes the man, that's sort of the message, right? You are a great scientist until everybody else is using the same technology as you, and then you need to distinguish yourself again by doing it in a way that no one else is doing it and answering questions that no one else is answering. So that should be a sort of a motivating factor. So this is just a slide I want to go over quickly, the idea of why we now talk about mentorship, when 15 years ago we didn't talk about mentorship. You had your supervisor, that was it. Well, research is changing. Now we're talking about, what we're sort of discussing it already, is how in today's expectations of the research world, you have clinical research programs, you have basic research programs, and they're expected to feed each other in a cycle of innovation. You can hear it said in many ways, but the basic scientist can't work alone anymore. You can't do something just because it's cool. The clinical people equally have questions they need answered, and they need the basic science community to use the tools and experience they have to help them change practice. So it's a circle that's expected, and it's sort of developed this translational medicine implementation science approach that we are now embracing, and if you don't do, you don't get funded. And so there's a new emphasis in this on networking, being part of a team, knowing what patient-oriented research is, what's knowledge translation and implementation of your data at any level in that cycle. You need to know that. So the expectation as you are being mentored in developing your skills is not that you are very gifted in the lab and that you can analyze your data, but you have to be able to translate it and put it into that translational science. So it's very complicated. It's not linear anymore. It's very dynamic. Circular would be the simplest way to explain it, although that's probably an underestimate of the complexity. Point to take is traditional training models don't meet the new needs. In the past, the training supervisor determined what were they interested in. Was there funding available? That's what we did. To a degree, that's still the driver. But the point there, I think, is that you would work for a supervisor who had money and not much driven by whether it fit into your career development per se. And you would learn about the discipline and the expertise in that lab, but you wouldn't necessarily know about the rest of the world. So you'd end up fairly group or lab centric with your expertise. It wasn't cross-disciplinary, lack of emphasis on professional skills and career development, which is a talk like this, for instance, would not have even been on the radar screen 10 years ago for a student. Wouldn't have had a mentee mentorship talk, and this is, I don't know how many times I've given this talk now. So it's something in demand. I'm doing it again next week for the HIV guys. Their training group has asked for it. So this emphasis on professional and career development is strong now, and it wasn't. And the old method of training that I was subjected to that I went through could lead to attrition and promote success in silence. So I'd be really good at this one little thing that I do, but I don't talk to the clinical guys. I show my story because I was lucky in that I didn't fall into that. And I have to say it wasn't by design, it was by luck. So there's an emphasis on mentor-mentee relationships now. And you can have multiple mentors. There are national programs emerging. I'm thinking of one called Renaissance, which is what we're rolling out at CLA, and we had a teleconference this morning with respect to the Canadian Respiratory Research Network and how to roll out a curriculum, a mentorship program. Richard's part of the CCHCSP program, which is a very strong structured mentorship program. So national programs are embracing it, multiple levels. It's happening from the NCEs through the training programs, as I've already said. And the idea here is to build capacity and promote career development, right? So funds, curriculum, and networking. It's not just Mr. Ryu, here's $20,000 a year, do a good job in the lab. Come back and see us in 2 years if you want. It doesn't work that way anymore. There's an expectation, both by the funding agencies, growing, but I think also by you and by the mentors, that there should be more than just, something to pay the bills. So the need is scary up there, right? It's complicated. How the heck am I going to navigate this? You need mentorship. You need a safety blanket, or a safety net rather, to get by. Research training is not vocational. What that means is this, again, it's just the same thing. You're not training to do research so that you can stand at a bench and use your hands and do cool techniques. That's not why you're doing graduate school. You want to be a professional scientist. It requires more than that. So one path also doesn't fit. So everybody's different, and we have to be flexible and nimble in mentorship that one can provide. So mentoring, I believe, in my mind, is the process of developing career development and support mechanisms in a systematic way. There's both professional development and personal development. Professional development being your career choices, as well as your skills at the bench, so to speak, or in the lab. But personal, what's good for me? Is this, how valuable is this? Am I going to be a happy person moving forward? Important to note the need, because I often speak to a diverse audience, the need for mentorship is not just graduate students, not just undergrads, but it spans the whole career spectrum. I need a mentor. I remember one of the hardest questions Richard ever asked me is, we have a mentorship meeting with him and Terry, and we were chatting about some issue Richard was having, and Richard looked at me and said, well, who's your mentor? And I didn't actually know. I didn't have one. So I had people I would ask questions, but I realized maybe I do need that one person that I know I can go, and probably it's Dr. Catini at this point, Peter Catini, but made me start thinking, yeah, I guess I maybe need some help sometimes. So it's a good thing to think about. So your mentors can be multiple. They don't all have to be here. Today's day and age, you can't have mentors that are off-site. And when you do find a mentor that works for you, it's often a lifelong thing. They don't go away because you stopped being a PhD student. I have contact with the Reiner Gosens in Groningen, I would say at least once every 2 weeks. We send some sort of an email back and forth about something. So, and I don't anticipate that stopping. He's been out of my lab now for 6-7 years. So the other part of mentorship is advising, getting guidance for short-term goals and obligations that you might have. That's where you can broaden the scope. You don't necessarily need your mentor to help you there. There may be people that you know have expertise in a certain area. You want to do a microRNA study or something, and you know Dr. Kaiser's lab does it, you know Nagme does it, so Aruni, you knock on her door and you guys sit and have coffee for 45 minutes and she's just advised you on something. That's not, in my mind, this is subtly different than mentoring. Mentoring is a higher level, longer commitment, and I make the distinction because you realize if you do agree to be someone's mentor, you're agreeing not to help them once, but to be there all the time, and it's an important consideration. The mentor can obviously advise, and the advising role can take, you take the opportunities around you to get your advisors. So the rules, and I'll go through a series of slides like this, which are sort of me thinking out loud, and we're never going to be done by 12:30. But mentors and mentees come with individual expectations and values. Everybody's different. So that has to be part of the dynamic. That's what makes it hard sometimes to find the right mentor. Relationships mean you work together. You have need. There are strengths and weaknesses, and you have to identify and deploy solutions together. So there are strengths and weaknesses referred to the individuals involved. So some of the mentees have strengths that the mentors don't, and vice versa. So it's something to keep in mind. These aren't simple relationships, and I like this, as if this could be a take-home message, this is one that I like. This quote that happened to stumble across online one time. It essentially says, circumstances aren't what gets you in trouble. What gets you in trouble are the people who don't try to fix the circumstance. And I'd like to empower you today. That's the idea. Start thinking about how do I take a circumstance and turn it around so that it can do what I want. I can make things happen the way I want to. Your mentor and you should have common vision. And I guess what I'm not saying aloud here is that all of this requires good communication, talking to, being honest and candid. And if you don't agree and you don't jive, you don't have to force a relationship between a mentor and a mentee. Usually know when it's right. It feels right, you're happy with it, you keep wanting to go back for more. And you have to have common vision, expectations, future objectives. Share where you think you want to go so you can leverage what your mentor has to offer. So as a mentee, and Min and I have been through a lot of discussions, say, in the last 6 months or so about his future life and where he wants to go, med school, scientist, and I tell him what I think, he tells me what he wants, and I think we had actually a fairly open discussion about it, and I'd like to think it's actually been very helpful to him, and I see I've got all sorts of reference letters I have to write for him as of last night. Thank you. But I think the idea there was, as I told him, based on my opinion of what I see in him, his own strengths, what I thought might be something to consider, and he told me what he felt like he wanted to do. And then eventually we kind of came around to a realization that we were probably both a little bit right, and I think now he's got at least 2 options, a plan A and a plan B, that he'd be happy if either of them come to fruition. So that was sort of building a shared vision and working together there. Yeah, this is another good quote. If you want to be a good mentor, now think about this. Some of you will have summer students you look after. You have to know the mentee, listen carefully, be provocative at times, ask them why they think what they think. We've got, it's too bad Matt's not here because I was going to pick on him when I got to this slide. But Matt will say outrageous things at times in our lab meetings, as my guys know, and I'll always come back, what do you mean by that? And that's what I mean by provocative. If somebody wants to say something, make them think about it, because you're not challenging them. You're not trying to grind them under your heel, but you're saying, okay, do you really want to live with what you said? And if you do, I'll accept it, but I need to know why you said it. And did you really mean it? Did you say it the way you want? Because I say things all the time that I don't mean it the way it came out. And so I like when people ask for clarification. So that's what I mean by be provocative. Don't be afraid to ask, your student, trainee, or ask your mentor, if you're the mentee, what do they mean by that? Help make connections and be an advocate. That's another rule, I believe, for a mentor. You should expect your mentor to help you make connections. But they're not going to wave a wand and it can happen. They need to know you're looking for that connection. As mentee, seek out help. Don't wait till the last minute. Right, Richard? That's often the hardest thing. And I find it can be a very stressful thing for me, because I know it's my job to provide that assistance you asked for, but you've given me 48 hours whilst I have 2 other deadlines on my desk to try and do it for you. And that's where the stress is. The stress doesn't come from me thinking this is another bit of work that I don't want to do. It's just, boy, this is something that would have been nice to have known 2 weeks ago. And I have to admit, my guys are very good about that. They figured that out a long time ago. Give Halayko 6-week notice for most things. So whenever possible. Don't take your mentor's advice personally, right? Don't get defensive. The truth should motivate. The story I always tell here, some of you have heard it. I was a master's student, had done very well, maybe 2/3 of the way through, had all the material for a paper, and had applied for a PhD studentship from NSER, got that funded, and I was in plant science, and somehow I fell in the habit of, I got content, fell in the habit of going for coffee and lunch with technicians every day. And my supervisor at the time, Dr. Hill, called me into the office, and he basically called me on that, because I guess I was not performing the way I had, and I hadn't realized it. And he essentially said to me, I can't remember what I wrote in the reference letter for your PhD studentship, but if I had to write it today, you probably wouldn't get that award. Unquote. Well, I left. I was mad, which is the correct response there. I didn't say anything to him. And I thought about it, and I guess I knew he was right. And that's what it did. Because I ended up thinking, well, okay, I'll show you. And I told my guys, probably all of you have heard that. Say, if I say something to you, I want your response to be, oh, really? Just wait, I'll show you. You didn't think that figure looked good? Just wait till you see the next one. So I'm not saying, or providing the feedback that I do, to be a jerk or to look down from my ivory tower. I'm doing it as a mentor, and I hope my students and my fellows appreciate that. I would try to have that relationship with them, and you have to find that person that you can trust, that is actually treating you with respect, but is telling you what you need to hear. Sometimes truth hurts, but when it hurts, it should motivate, because I generally don't provide very blunt and direct direction to somebody who I don't think it's worth giving to. And that's something to keep in mind. If I say that to you directly, like, come on, Anurag, that wasn't the best oral comprehensive you ever had. I only said it because I know you can do better. I wouldn't say that if I thought that was the best you could do. Keep that in mind. If we do this because we enjoy it, your passion may be more inspiring than your advice. If you're a mentor, so when I talk to you, I realize that if you see me doing 16 things at the same time, that's probably a more effective way for you to know that I like what I'm doing and that what we're doing is important than me sitting you down and telling you you should like what you're doing and know this is important. So what you do can speak louder than what you say as a mentor. And I think it's important that your mentees know you as a mentor. So share your life story. Tell them, as I've done today, a little bit about yourself so they appreciate where you're coming from. Helps the mentee appreciate where your strengths lie. As a mentee, you need to find that passion and stay true to it. Because don't forget, 5% of the time in research you're on a high. Something worked. But that has to offset the 95% of the time when you're sort of trudging along and say, man, is this ever going to work? Or it's 11 o'clock, I want to go to bed, but I've got to get this manuscript done. So you keep in mind, you got to be passionate about what you're doing. You're a good mentee as well. And you can't really job market. So people often worry, what am I going to do when I finish? Where am I going to end up? You know, I'll bet you 3 years ago, Dr. Adrian West never imagined he'd be sitting in a Breathe workshop as an assistant professor in physiology at the University of Manitoba.
I was probably depressed and drunk.
Yeah, so there you go. And that's when the light went on. Winnipeg.
That's the association, isn't it? Person and drunk both going on, they end up in Winnipeg.
So I think, my point in saying this is I think sometimes mentees, and understandably so, you're trying to forward your way in life and have a career. I think sometimes if you're going in science, you should just let it happen. And I had no idea I ended up back in Manitoba as an assistant prof. Even when I set off to do a postdoc, I really no way that would lead me. I didn't honestly think I'd be back in Winnipeg because at that time it didn't occur to be jobs. So try not to predict it, just be prepared to take any opportunity that comes your way. Just a few more slides like this and then I can just open it up to some discussions. As a mentor, keep in mind that your advice and the example you set are both important. What you say is maybe not as important as what you do sometimes. So those are important things to consider in the mentorship role. And you can have a tremendous impact in someone's life. And that's something that I think I've come to learn. And that, frankly, is the most motivating or supportive bit of evidence I have when I have to say something to someone that maybe is not as comfortable as it might have to be, or something that you know they don't want to hear. A student wants to go master's, PhD, and they're sitting smiling in your office, and you know, I don't think that's the right thing for you. And the reason I say it, you know, and have to, you know, is that it's their life. And I really strongly believe that if I let them proceed, it's just, where is this going to lead? I don't see this as your career path. And maybe I'm wrong, but maybe you can find a mentor who sees that and can take that. I don't see myself as a person that can do that. So that's a very strong motivator for me. I would say without question, the people who come under my wing as mentees, the most satisfying thing I do in my career is to see them succeed. Take away all the papers, take away the grants, then I wouldn't have any mentees, but that aside, seeing them succeed is, you know, the most exciting thing. To see Richard get his first CIHR grant, see Adrian, even at that level where they're not under my wing per se, I find that actually more exciting to think about than me getting my next CIHR grant, because I know they'll take care of the damage if I need money. So, ego's going up. No. So, as a mentee, keep this in mind, even though I'm well-intentioned and I give advice, it may not all be good. Some people aren't thinking about your best welfare. They're not trying to make a bad decision for you consciously, but what they think is good for you might not be good for you, and you need to be able to take that advice and distill it and say, yeah, good idea, but you're not considering this, which, you know, somehow has been lost in the translation. So keep that in mind. Use your common sense to assess the advice. And again, I go back to the discussion Ian and I had about med school research career in the last 6 months or so. And I think Ian's been very commendable in going off and thinking about things. You know, don't say yes when someone suggests something either. Somebody has something. I've learned that one. You know, man, dude, you should consider this. Don't say, oh yeah, great idea, I'll do that. Nice, I'll think about that. And then the next day make the decision after you really have thought about it. Most decisions can wait a day. So use your common sense. And if you find someone helpful, adopt them as your mentor. It doesn't have to be me. If you're my student or my fellow, if you find that you can sit and easily talk with Dr. Kaiser, adopt him as your mentor, and it's probably a good idea to tell someone that you're looking to them for mentorship. They may not even realize it. they may appreciate the fact that, oh, okay, I can fill that role. There's an obligation that comes with it. Last couple of slides then. Good mentees are not passive. But they're also not too aggressive. Keep that in mind. Go where the science takes you, accentuate the positive. So if you're scientists, you want to build your careers and believe in what you do it well, and when the data says go right, even though you thought you were going to go left, go right. Because I can guarantee you it's more fun on the right than on the left. Sell yourself and your work. So this is sort of career development advice here. Tell a good story. So be prepared to talk about what you do and yourself in a exciting way that's attractive to the person you're speaking to at whatever level, layman, professor. You'll get far more attention if someone, that's an interesting guy with an interesting story, than, well, I think he's an interesting guy with an interesting story. I couldn't tell, getting the forest from the trees there. Schmooze and act like an accomplished scientist. That's one that you need to do at meetings in particular. If you're at a Bob function and you're at the Christmas party, don't act like you're somehow lesser than the person you're speaking to, even though it might be Dr. Clausen. Talk to him like a colleague. That's what we want. Those are the people I remember. The student, I never forget the first time I met Detmer Schaafsma. Most of you know Detmer. I was walking to a poster with one of his colleagues at an ATS meeting, and I never met him before. He was a PhD student then, and I was walking to a poster of one of his colleagues, and I was halfway there, and all of a sudden out on the left, there's this bullet. Dr. Halayko, how are you? I'm Detmer Schaafsma. And next thing I knew, I met his poster. Well, he ended up being my fellow, and so it worked. So, it's sell yourself. Act like a professional or an accomplished scientist, and that'll serve you well. Life balance is important. Don't forget, work isn't everything. You need to have some fun, blow out some steam. You need to be depressed and drunk in a bar in Halifax on occasion.
I highly recommend it.
Okay, I think I'm going to be in here. So this is the wrap-up summary of what I've tried to capture here. And I try not to send a lot of messages here. The idea is to hopefully stimulate open discussion as for the last part, as we just sort of sit and talk about specifics. But this is my own quote. The relationship between supervisor and trainee is almost intimate. It requires mutual respect, honesty, commitment, mutual, right? Not just the mentee respecting the mentor, but the other way around. It means leaving your ego out of making and receiving constructive critique, and it means working together, right? My students work with me, not for me, is the way I approach it. My fellows, in fact, my technicians and such, my whole team, that's the way I approach it. Good mentors advise, support, open doors and opportunities. So if somebody's doing that for you, they're being a good mentor. Appreciate and understand the mentee's vision. I don't want to make a Rooney be what he doesn't want to be, even though I think I could. I want a Rooney to be what he wants to be, so I'm going to help him achieve that vision, but I can't do that if I don't know what it is. Good mentees, so if you think of yourself as a mentee now, you need to know what's good advice. Listen to it. It's not all good advice. It's all well-intentioned. It should all be taken with respect and with thanks, but it may not be the best advice for you. That's your job to decide. Seize relevant opportunities. And it comes down to a whole bunch of stuff I've said. Act like a professional. Richard brought it up earlier. Push yourself. Go out of your comfort zone. By doing all those things, when the opportunity arises, you'll be able to take it. Because luck is the same for everyone. It's your ability to take advantage of opportunity that makes you look lucky, I think, at times. And have a vision of where you think you want to get to. That's a weird sentence. It's awful. And where you don't want to get to. If you know you don't want to be me, right? You don't want to be independent scientist writing CIHR grants, that's fine. But you should know what you want to be instead. So again, it's part of your vision. So these are just some of the things that I think good mentees can bring to the table, and then that's that reading list that I referred to earlier that you can go to if you want. And I think, yeah, so the only other slides I've got, I wasn't going to go through them. In fact, I forgot I was planning to print them and hand them out. Just sort of lists of questions or concepts rather, that grad students might think about going to their mentor for. The idea here is to help stimulate discussion and say, I have, point number 4 is what I want to talk about. So I'm not going to talk about them directly. So that's basically what I have planned, a little longer than I hoped, but happy to discuss. And I think it would work well if Adrian and Richard want to participate in the answering as well. I'm quite happy with that. Any of you, in fact, because all of you have had mentorship opportunities. So does anyone have a question, comment? Well, I get a close salad.
I'll start making a comment. Historically, I'm trying to remember during my training period when I had a good mentor, and I ended up learning my best lessons from seeing their mistakes rather than the good advice they gave me. And, staying close to someone who you don't quite think is doing the right thing and learning from what they're doing wrong is actually pretty damn powerful as well. I wouldn't advertise that you're looking to them for negative mentorship in that respect, but, things that annoy you about people, things that annoy you about your supervisor, things that you see your supervisor having problems with in their interactions, that's the sort of thing you can use to work on yourself as well, to be a better person at that level.
I want to add something. I think what you said at the beginning is important too. I think the whole society and culture has changed. It was almost seen as a weakness if you would ask somebody to mentor you maybe 10, 20 years ago. Whereas now, every serious program, university, grants, they want mentorship because they want to make sure that they train people that are going to be successful. And they feel that that's important to support you during your early career. So don't shy away from it. Don't take it personal if they critique you.
So has anybody ever had a situation where they wanted advice or they needed advice and they felt they got it either in a good way or were unable to get it? You don't need to name names. What sort of situations have you found yourself in where having a mentor would have been helpful, would have possibly made the road easier, or not?
If you have a mentor that's accessible, that's good, I would say. Somebody you can talk to, just walk into their office.
Okay.
Some mentees should probably talk first, but
Well, I think that's important because the demand changes over time as well. Rudy and I would fairly regularly meet every 2 weeks when he first started. I don't know how often we meet now. Now there's a recurring meeting on my calendar every 2 weeks, but I think maybe if we use every second one, our group GLAD meeting is usually sufficient at this point. So it changes over time, and there will be moments when it becomes acute again, and there's more of an acute need. You're writing a studentship or something like that. So yeah, accessibility is important, and it's something to consider in picking a mentor, right? Because there may be somebody, we're going through this now with Mitch in the mentorship program. We have this initiation meeting, Dr. Clausen and I, with all the new PIs and Mitch, and we asked them for suggestions who they would like as their mentors. And there have been a few occasions where he said, well, nice idea, but I'm not really sure that will work because that person's pretty tapped. So is there another option for you to consider? So it is important, and it's personal, or it's different for every person, the need and the type of need as well. And I think it's important to discriminate too why you want that accessibility, about what, right? There are some things that it's probably unfair to
Yeah, no, for me, grade 12, I did the Sanofi Biotech Challenge. And so then they kind of put your name into the hat and they match you up with a certain PI. So the first PI that I got matched up with, he would just kind of ignored me. Like I used to show up to, I went to school, say, Corporation and Collegiate, so I used to like bus all the way to the St. Boniface Leisure Center. I did it for 2 days, and the guy just was like not receptive, like just kind of there, doing nothing. I made a huge effort, but
Yeah, well, it can happen. If you got matched with someone, so there's a, breaking a rule right there in the sense that maybe that's not the person that you would have ever picked as a mentor, if you had met them in advance, right? So they were hoping, but you can't just put two people together and expect it to happen. I try to give a bit of a touchy-feely, approach to this talk that, it's okay. You have to respect. I guess you have to like your mentor. I don't know. Do you think you have to like them? I think you have to certainly respect them.
In my opinion, like mentorship is beyond just the simple supervisor and student relationship.
Yeah.
Like you may be talking to somebody who you don't realize he's a mentor now. When I see your talk, like I can correlate a lot of stuff in my life where I can say I've been fortunate that I already always had some mentorship at all stage of my life. Because when I was back home in India, my elder brother used to be my mentor. Because he has just gone through the phases that I was going through. So he would always advise me. Now I'm here. I continue with all kinds of suggestions, thinking that I have, and you listen to it, and maybe like sometimes you may not be agreeing to them, then, but still you listen to them and get back to me in a way which is kind of reassuring to me, or like we can even with the way that you say that we can discuss about it and all those things. It's kind of reassuring and makes me think more about those things what I am thinking right now, right? So that I'm more organized. So in that way, I would consider myself fortunate that I have mentors. And apart from you, like I know Dr. Kaiser is there, Adrian is there. Like if I have some problem, I could always go back to them and like discuss. So that despite them not being my direct mentor, I have this thing in my mind that okay, I can go to these people. Right? So
I kind of look at Aruni as a mentor. Being like
Well, that's why I
almost
did
naive.
mingle mentor-mentee here, because I think you all are mentors.
I just have a comment. I never hear anybody say this, that it matters to a mentee how much confidence the mentor shows in his students. Because it's really important. It's a very tiny little thing as to how much confidence a mentee cultivates in the mentor, but also it matters to a mentee how much confidence the mentor shows in them when it comes to either events where they have to showcase their work or in front of other PIs or whatever. I don't know. What do you think? Is that important?
Well, I think it's very important. I wouldn't say it's a little thing at all. Well, my guys can probably, they can speak freely with me in the room, but I tell my people up front, probably all of you can attest to this. Thomas might not have this lecture yet, where I reach over and I pull a thesis off the shelf and I put it on the desk in front of me, and I slide it across and I point at it. And I said, whose name's on the cover of that book? And it's one name. It's the student's name. And so I said, from day one, this is your project. So any successes you have are yours. You're the one who's going to present at ATS or whatever meeting you're going to, big international meeting. So I try to, my approach is, I guess in giving confidence at the outset is just say, it's your program, I'm putting you in charge. So right from the get-go, I give you that support. Now, it goes beyond that. Now, what if you start failing and such? The mentor has to find what you're good at and steer you that way, help you, provide the support in that regard. Say, you can do this. And you know what? I know that a postdoc in the next lab is doing this other stuff, or this other method that you might need, and the mentor, your mentor knows maybe it's not your strength, but now they're putting confidence in you to interact with the person that, can help you or help guide you. So again, I guess my approach would be never pull the rug out from under the mentee. Always find a way to have them feel like they've accomplished it. That would be my way of approaching. I don't know.
I think it's really important what you're saying. I do think you can make a distinction between a supervisor, who is your daily or depending on how frequent you interact, person helping you with your research on an ongoing basis. And then there's mentors who, in my opinion, not necessarily have to be your supervisor, but can advise you on career advice and which courses to take, or like Min, I've sat down a couple of times with him to talk about his career, where he wants to go, how he wants to approach that. I forced him to sit down at the beach and think about his career, those kind of things. That's different. I don't necessarily have to put in a lot of confidence in his research work, right? That's just a different role. To me, and I actually think that everybody needs a mentor outside of their supervisor, because there's a potential conflict of interest, right? If you're a really good student and your supervisor wants to keep you, he's not going to tell you that you need to go somewhere else to complement your research work and be a successful postdoc. This person is going to try and keep you, right, as a postdoc, whereas that might not be good advice for your future career, might be very good advice for that supervisor, but not for you as a mentee. So I think it's really important to seek different mentors and in different roles. But I think you bring up a very important thing. But as a career mentor, I don't necessarily need to have a really lot of confidence in your research work, right?
Yeah, why I said that was because what I have come to learn, this is not my experience, but I'm students, I mean other students. Some of them have come up and said that advisors say things like, hey, he can do it. Look at his lab, they're doing so well. Look at our lab, you can do such a basic experiment. That sort of, to a mentee, it really brings you down. It actually kills you completely.
I don't know what's your take on this, but I consider a lot of time we use the word interchangeably, supervisor and mentor. But not all the time supervisors can be your mentor.
Can be a mentor, maybe, yeah.
So mentors are somebody who can actually give you advice, and they'll always speak with the intentions for your benefit.
Yeah, you're right.
Not and supervisors maybe, may not be. If you find a mentor in your supervisor, you're lucky. If you don't, then you gotta find.
It's obviously context dependent as well, but
Yeah.
I think it's the responsibility of a mentor and a supervisor to tell a trainee or a mentee when they're doing a crap job. When they're just not cutting it, you have to be able to say, that's terrible, you have to do better than that. That has to be part of it as well, because you need to know what the standard is. And we joke all the time about, about his standards, and he's excellent in the lab, there's no problems there, but when something's not right, I have to feel like I can tell him, you can do better.
But there's a proper intelligence.
Oh, yes, there's soul crushing and then there's uplifting, they're different.
I've had a PI, this was in my undergrad, I was in fourth year. When the project was working on, I was doing interactions with soft body larvae, interactions with fungi. And the fungal community that I was growing died. And all I had to show for it was a really bad lab book. So I go up to the supervisor and said, I'm sorry, but it died. We just weren't able to get some new samples in time. So she said, yeah, that's all right, just write it up. I wrote it up and submitted it. And then next week, she called me in her office and said that I should quit my career to become a scientist. That I will not be successful in what I'm doing, and there's no way in hell this will be possible enough to be publishable research. So I was obviously angry and drank a flask that night, and then picked myself back up and then realized, maybe I need to change something.
Yeah, you can't, that's irresponsible to make that kind of judgment from one failure. as
Oh,
well.
absolutely.
You know, that doesn't sound right.
Well, that's where you use your common sense.
Yeah.
So there's a kernel of some truth in what she said. Now, the way it was said, the literal meaning of what she said, absolutely inappropriate, not what was intended. But if you were able to glean out of that, maybe there was something I could have done better, or next time it won't happen, then that's what I was trying to explain a little earlier. It's like, you don't want to hear it, and that person needs a little, work on their, communication skills. But at the end of the day, she might have actually done you a favor, so years later, you can say that. I'm sure the next day or the next week, you didn't say that.
No, I said well away from her.
Yeah, but so what I heard, what I'm trying to not defend her in the least, what I heard was you said, I thought there was, okay, maybe there's something I was changing. That's what I heard that I liked. You got something out of it. And you did, yes, there's a personal thing.
Yeah.
It was a totally inappropriate way to say it, but you learned something from that and moved forward. So you also learned that if you are ever in a position of having a student or someone you're mentoring, you're not going to speak to them that way either, right? Because it's not, it doesn't hurt. But it also works, works both ways. Like I said, to me, I think about that experience I had where I got that kick in the pants. And it was done not in a personal way, it was just blunt to the point, and I realized it's okay to be blunt to the point sometimes. And it's not personal. And it's, there's tears involved frequently and whatnot, and I said, look, don't do that. I didn't say anything about you. I talked about your performance. Don't, think about what I said. Get mad at me, go out the door, get mad at me, come back next week and show me that I didn't know what I was talking about. Then I'm happy. Hate me for a week, I can live with that. So that's what I sort of get out of that. And then the other point is that the distinction about the supervisor and the mentor is very important. I try to make that distinction when I talk about the mentor versus the advisor, right? Your supervisor could be more like an advisor and not a mentor, and your mentor can be someone else. And as a student, you have advisory committees, right? You don't have mentorship committees. So it's sort of up to you to find the mentorship.
So I have one more comment. I think the mentees need to be really proactive in their interaction with the mentor. Before I engaged in that mentorship program where Andrew and Terry Klassen are my mentor, I got some homework and I read up on it, and I from the start made an agenda to discuss the things that I want to discuss every time during the mentor meeting, just to structure it. And I took it serious, and I wanted to make sure that it was well spent time with them, and that we were not just sitting down chatting about it. Yes, we end up doing anyway sometimes. But I think it's important. Most mentors are really busy, right? So you want to make sure that if you interact with them, that they get something out of it too. And it helps a lot if you come prepared and not sit down and say, well, what are we going to talk about this month? Mentor's going to say, well, are you doing fine? Okay, let's meet again next month.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
I think that's really important to position against what Neil said very early on. A good mentor is someone I should have access to. Yes, but when you have that access, it has to be for a good reason and it has to be an effective interaction. It can't just be, oh, I can't find the pipettes. I'm writing my CHR grant here, man. I think you can find her. You know what I mean? That there's a fine line between having an effective, driven relationship and being high maintenance. You have to avoid being high maintenance. If access means you want to be able to come in my office 6 times a day about anything, that's probably high maintenance. And it makes it hard to be a good mentor.
So I think I have a comment similar to that. And I think whenever Andrew's been very accessible to me, and when I need help, he's always there. But I think one thing I always keep in mind, even though we have a really good relationship and really candid and open relationship, that whenever you go talk to your mentor, you should be dead afraid and be serious.
I think, like,
I'm glad I achieved that.
I mean, we can have conversation, I mean, we meet in the gym, and we'll have a small chat conversation, but I think whenever I had, like, arrange a meeting, or like have a meeting with Andrew or Dr. Kaiser, I'm a bit afraid to go into the room and speak, so that I'm a bit more alert, and that we don't, like, necessarily waste too much time.
Yeah. You're not afraid of us, you're afraid of wasting our time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that has been like one lesson that I learned from Andrew and Dr. Kaiser, like working with people who don't necessarily have, time to waste. That's what I'm saying.
I remember that day, walking by, Dr. Kaiser was yelling at you, man, you're wasting my time. Get out of my office. Kidding.
Yeah, so I think
Go ahead.
Just a shift from this, I was a little curious about your PhD in basic sciences to your postdoc in clinical. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you, how did you approach that? Like, how was your, what did you have?
So the postdoc was still basic science, but it was in a clinical setting. So I wasn't suddenly doing clinical research per se, but I was doing it in a clinical environment. And I guess there was a part of it that I was attracted to. The reason I went to work in that lab was because that man at that time was one of the leading molecular biology people in our field. He so happened to be a physician working, in a clinical section that I frankly didn't appreciate how diverse and strong the research environment was and how it interfaced with the clinical department until I got there. So I can't claim that I had enough insight to say that's what I want to do. But when I got there, I embraced it. I didn't get there and go, well, geez, this isn't a basic science department stuff, but I used to. I realized there's a lot more opportunity there. So I feel you're giving me too much credit if you said I decided to go to a clinical science. I didn't. It worked out that way, and then when I realized I was there, I exploited it. I used it to move forward because I realized there were opportunities that I hadn't had before.
Well, another example is Megan Azad, who's just a new PI here at Mitch. She did a pure basic science physiology PhD with Dr. Gibson. But then she said, well, I want to move a little bit more towards clinically relevant research that I can see a little bit easier with interaction with patients. So she then did a postdoc with Dr. Alan Becker here. And now she has combined basic science background with clinical population health research. And she is on track to be a very successful researcher. So I think she on purpose searched something that she wanted to complement her previous knowledge with a new insight, and that worked out really well.
Well, wasn't that your motivation for coming from Holland to sick kids to work with Mark?
Yeah, well, like I wanted to become a pediatric surgeon in the third year of medical school, and then I went up to the professor and said I want to do pediatric surgery and I want to do some chart reviews. And they said, well, we don't do that here. Why don't you go into the lab for 3 months and then talk to me again? And then I ended up adding on years and years to do a PhD and everything. But that's a whole different. But then in the end, for me, I liked it so much that I wanted to combine clinical work with basic science research, and that was the reason to move to Winnipeg. Yeah.
Where did you come across your prospective postdoc? How did you get to know him?
Oh, well, at meetings. I saw him present. I was aware. I was aware of his. Oh, you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, that's the role of the next week. I'm interviewing for 1, 2.3, 4.
Yeah. What'd you ask me?
How did you meet your?
Yeah, right, at meetings. So he was a very prominent guy. He was at the podium talking, and I was familiar with his work. That was about it. I knew who he was, and was intrigued by the work. And then a lucky thing happened, an opportunity knocked, where he actually came for a week to work with Dr. Stevens in Winnipeg because he was writing a grant, Solway was, and he needed some data and ability to say he could do some muscle mechanics work in this NIH grant he was writing. So he came up, it was dead, middle of January, it was dead cold. And, I was the lab tech, I guess I was finishing my PhD at that point. And he came, and I ended up being his chauffeur. I picked him up and whatnot every day, and we'd work together in the lab a bit. Got to know him then, we'd go for lunch. One day we were chatting about postdocs and such. He was advising me to go work with Olson in Texas, what's his name? Impact Factor 140. He's rewritten the book on muscle development. I want to say Nigel Olson. He was the drummer for Elton John. Eric Olson. And he was, and I said, well, what about Julian Solway? And he was, really? Yeah. So that's sort of how it happened. So the fact that I had him there captive for 4 or 5 days cemented it for me. I liked this guy, and it was more just work. And I knew I probably would like him based on what I knew about him at meetings. And I might have introduced myself at a meeting. I think I vaguely remember showing him my poster one time before he came to Winnipeg. And he admitted that he had reviewed it, and it was my first big PhD paper. And he really liked the paper and whatnot. So we sort of had struck a rapport, but that, that goes to this, acting like a scientist or a colleague when you go to a meeting and not waiting to be approached, but approaching someone. And it sort of just happened. Because there were others I thought about, but he rose to the top quite clearly for me. So, but you got to get out of the network.
About networking, how much contribution the PI can help to find a position for a grad student or in PDF? What's the...
I think the mentor can provide little to no assistance to getting you a position. They can make connections so you can find a position. That's where you have to empower yourself. I can connect these guys. They want to get a job. I say, Min, here's Dr. So-and-so, talk to him. That's it. I can't phone that other guy and say you should hire him. I could. But if I knew they had a job and I was going to write a recommendation letter, sure, all of that. But it's your job to find the opportunity and discuss with your mentor and use them to make it a little more accessible if they can, right? So I've had this question where there's actually been trainees, grad student and postdoc level who sincerely thought it was their mentor's job to find them their next position. Not just write them a reference letter, but actually seek it out actively and say, I found you a spot with so-and-so. And if you're asking me that, then no, that's not my job as a mentor to find you a job. It is my job, my obligation, I think, not obligation, it is, as a good mentor, I should be helping you find a new one. But if you're waiting for me to do it for you, that's not the right way to do it, right? So if you've got a list of 100, I can help you pare it down to 20, right? But I don't have to ask me to find 20. So that there's that gets to this empowerment. Right? Being a good mentee or using your mentor effectively means you know what you want. You have a vision. Here it is. Can you help me get there? Right? You're the frog in the hand looking over the lake. I love that picture. And I'm the hand holding you, and I can help get you across the lake. But you have to tell me which lake you want to cross first.
So recently there is a career workshop by Sachin Katia.
Oh yeah.
So the whole seminar he was pointing about the mentorship about the students and getting postdocs.
Yeah.
So when I heard his lecture, he keep on telling 1,000 times that networking.
Yes.
Networking.
Yeah.
Without networking, it's very hard even though you have a good work, good publication.
Yeah.
You need to be very aggressive in such kind of thing. And you should be able to talk to your mentor who can be able to direct you in the right direction.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's my job, to help you network. Right. I know you need to, I know you want to. If you come, my guys will tell you, come to ATS meeting with me, I'll introduce you to everybody I know. You don't have to even ask me. Say, this is Min, he's my master's student, this is Julie Solly, this is Ray Panettiere, this is, I mean, I don't know, I just do it. That's my job. And, but it's up to you to take this next stage. Or if you know there's someone you'd like to meet, don't wait for serendipity to happen and you and I and him or her happen to be standing next to each other, you know, at the buffet line at lunch. Tell me, I'd really like to meet Dr. Jones from San Diego. And do you know him? I said, yes, I do. Okay, let's go find him. That's, yeah, mentorship want to do that, because that's helping you move to the next level, I would say. So he's correct in that respect, but it's up to you to help the mentor tell, you know where you want to go and what you're, who you're interested in networking with. Yeah, good.